Sorry, I use Mac, so I'm having a trouble with this. Yep, cool. Alright. Hi, I'm Karishma and I'm an advocate of a concept called total liberation. Oh, the microphone? Yeah? Does this work? Total liberation is a position that acknowledges the commonalities, intersections between, and the need for abolition of all oppression, whether it be towards humans, non-humans, or the environment. Here specifically, I'll be talking about why advocates of human social justice should care about non-human liberation and what that entails. The values and ideals championed by feminism, such as equality, consent, opposition to unjustified hierarchies, oppression and dominance, all apply to animal rights, and animal exploitation is in direct contrast to these values. Willfully ignoring animal aggression is a position of privilege. I'd like to share this quote from author Isaac Bashevis Singer. Human beings see oppression vividly when they're the victims, otherwise they're victimized blindly and without a thought. Animal oppression is, like other oppression, based on a form of discrimination known as speciesism. It is a hierarchy of moral consideration based solely on species membership. I liked the BBC Ethics Guide definition of it, which describes it as the idea that being a human is good enough for human animals to have greater moral rights than non-human animals. This is as arbitrary as saying men should have more basic fundamental rights than non-men because of their gender, or that white people should have more rights than people of colour because of their race, as species is not chosen. Speciesism manifests in unjustified systematic hierarchies such as anthropocentrism or human supremacy. It also leads to valuing some non-human species over others, such as cats and dogs over pigs and chickens. Western people criticise other countries for eating dogs, but will happily eat pigs who also value their lives. The two behaviours are almost identical, but one group's behaviour is more demonised than the other, and that is a form of racism. Speciesism is also a position that ignores morally relevant criteria in favour of things that don't really matter when considering who receives moral rights. Things like intelligence, which we would never use to defend the mistreatment of other humans, or ability to plan for the future, which not all humans can do. There are humans that have the cognitive capabilities of the species that we exploit, and often the animals that we exploit have their abilities grossly underestimated in the public consciousness. Either way, reasoning along those lines is nothing but ableism or discrimination based on ability to justify another form of oppression, which is speciesism. There are plenty of other examples of arguments that are used to defend non-human subjugation that many of us would never use to justify human subjugation, and similar arguments have been made by humans to oppress other humans in the past. Ideas like might makes right, which is the idea that we can dominate those weaker than us, have been used to justify things like colonialism. Now, I've talked about morally irrelevant criteria, but what is morally relevant criteria? Well, the criteria for moral consideration should be sentience. This is the ability to have a subjective experience of the world, value your life and safety, have interests, and have the ability to suffer, to know the difference between pleasure and pain. These are the exact same reasons we would give any human group moral consideration. The consequences of speciesism are vast. We slaughter more than 70 billion non-human individuals per year for food, not including hundreds of billions of aquatic animals. Millions more are killed in vivisection labs and shelters. We objectify them, use them as transport, entertainment, clothing, and medical experiments, and we've never asked for any kind of consent. We forcibly breed them, buy, sell, and kill their children and separate them from their families, and we confine them so they don't have any autonomy. They are slaves to human whims, whereby they are forced to produce, and their labour is their bodies. It's the data they produce, and it's the entertainment that they provide for humans. Even the ones we claim to love are killed just because no one will give them a home. They are at our complete mercy, and we control their lives completely. I've already talked about the inconsistent logic used to justify animal use, which if accepted as permissible, can and has been used to oppress women, people of colour, and other human groups. One can clearly see the commonality of oppression and the identical logic used to justify human and non-human oppression. As long as we accept these bad arguments for animal exploitation, there's no reason why we won't accept them for humans. If we only care about humans, not only is that not liberation and justice, it's simply a shifting of the burden of oppression to some of the most vulnerable and voiceless in our society. Now, what is the solution to speciesism and animal exploitation? It's a philosophical position and movement called veganism. Veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. It is a social justice movement promoting the abolition of non-humans being used as commodities and objects, as well as encouraging alternatives to the products of animal exploitation. Vegetarianism is not a solution. Vegetarianism commodifies the female reproductive system and doesn't challenge the objectification of animals being products and producers for us to use and exploit. Dairy cows are kept pregnant, and when they lactate, the children are removed and are often killed for veal or become dairy cows themselves, thereby adding another generation to the cycle of violence and exploitation, just so we can steal the breast milk meant for them. Dairy cows also end up as meat when they're no longer productive and profitable to the industry. Male chicks in the egg industry are gassed, ground up alive, thrown in the trash, or suffocated in plastic bags, as they are useless to the egg industry. Wild hens only lay 10 to 15 eggs per year, while we force exploited hens to lay 250 to 300 a year, causing their bodies to quickly deteriorate. Laying eggs severely depletes nutrients from the hen's bodies, especially calcium, as each eggshell produced requires 10% of the calcium stored in her bones. It is veganism that acknowledges animals as subjects, not objects or commodities. Those who exploit animals often objectify them for their body parts. For example, lamb's legs, chicken breasts, a cow's skin becomes a pair of shoes, the fur from many small creatures becomes a coat, or a pig's body becomes a sandwich. Women are often called pieces of meat in order to objectify them. Our body parts and our reproductive systems are disassociated from ourselves, not literally in this case as with animals, but figuratively. Veganism also accepts sentience as a requirement for moral personhood. Anyone that has lived with a companion animal knows that they have personalities of their own. The complex lives of even the simplest creatures have all been documented scientifically, down to mice, fish, and even insects. Animal rights is also in opposition to the animal welfare position, which is a position that we can use and exploit animals for human whims as long as we treat them humanely. So we should humanely forcibly impregnate a dairy cow and kill her son, or humanely use an animal purely to entertain us, or humanely kill an animal who is an interest in continuing to live. But there are no humane ways to objectify and use another sentient being for pleasure, as the vast majority of animal use is completely unnecessary. This could be palate pleasure, fashion, convenience, habit, or tradition, which should never override the value of someone's life and safety. Many people do think animal products are a necessity. However, non-vegan, science-based institutions and countless studies all support the fact that it's perfectly healthy to eat a plant-based diet. Every single nutrient your body needs can be found in a plant-based diet, and the American Dietetic Association states that vegan diets are appropriate for all individuals during all stages of life and for athletes. Obviously, for the animals, veganism is nothing but positive. However, there are far-reaching consequences. I'll briefly talk about some environmental and global issues surrounding animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is a leading cause of global greenhouse gas emissions, more than transport combined, and in New Zealand, animal agriculture contributes 46% of our emissions. It is responsible for up to 33% of all freshwater consumption globally, is the leading cause of species extinction, ocean dead zones, water pollution, and habitat destruction. 10,000 years ago, 99% of biomass was wild animals. Today, humans and the animals that we raise as food make up 98% of the biomass. A key criticism of patriarchy is that men take up and dominate space in society. We do this as a species to other animals. Many humans from disenfranchised groups see commonalities between human and animal oppression. Obviously, I'll defer to voices from those communities to make those comparisons. Author Carol J. Adams wrote 2 books which focused on the links between the oppression and objectification of women and non-human animals. Christopher Sebastian McGeers is an excellent writer who has written about the links between the enslavement of African Americans and non-human slavery. Authors Isaac Bashevis Singer and Charles Wilson riskily write about parallels with the Holocaust. Exploring these links is understandably controversial, and every group's oppression is unique in their own, but ignoring an intersectional analysis of oppression or failing to acknowledge that all oppressions are linked and reinforce each other with common threads is a mistake. Racism, sexism, and all forms of oppression all follow the same logical reasoning as speciesism, that because someone is different, they are less than you or you can exploit them. Some groups have been compared to non-human animals to justify their exploitation historically. The Aboriginal people of Australia were classified under the Flora and Fauna Act until 1967. African Americans were once considered 3/5 of a person in the Constitution, as well as being compared to wild animals even to this day. Women, especially women of colour, have been considered closer to non-human nature and less than rational white man, which is the epitome of personhood under patriarchy. The interesting thing is that these groups are being compared to non-humans to justify their mistreatment, as if treating non-humans like this is also acceptable. It is the base oppression that is rarely questioned. I'll end with this quote by animal rights activist Ruth Harrison. If one person is unkind to an animal, it is considered to be cruelty. But where a lot of people are unkind to animals, especially in the name of commerce, the cruelty is condoned, and once large sums of money are at stake, will be defended by the last, to the last by otherwise intelligent people. Thank you.